Hello, class. Welcome back. So, today we are going to answer a very common question asked by a lot of individuals who are trying to improve their public speaking. And I get this question a lot, right? Not this specific phrasing, but it's a very common question that I believe that many of you all want the answer to. Now, the question is, how can I make public speaking easier? Of course, public speaking, I think without a doubt, is one of the most difficult things or skills to master or even get better at, right? I think for most people, they're not really interested in mastering public speaking, whereas they just want to overcome the fear, do a good job, because it's very difficult, simply put. Okay, so let's take a look at some tips that I have to make public speaking easier. Now, to start, this is the first thing that you should do when you are giving a presentation. And the first thing is understand your audience. Now, why is this important? Because think about it. You are writing speeches for your audience. And this is one problem that a lot of individuals have trouble with, or is the reason why they lack engagement or interest from the audience, is because their audience just doesn't want to hear about their topic, right? Or they're talking about a specific idea or an example that just doesn't resonate with their audience. So how do you forego that? How do you improve your chances of your audience actually caring and wanting to listen to you? Simple. It is understand what they want to hear. It is understanding what examples that they want to know, some information that would be extremely helpful to them. Now, here are some examples to understand your audience. Understand their likes, dislikes, common interests, common problems. What topics do they want to hear? Now, this is the most important step, and this is the first step when it comes to actually drafting your speech. So before you even write a speech, you need to do research on your audience. How old are they? Demographics, what career fields are they in? Are they native English speakers? Are they not? Do they have, if they are ESL students, will they have difficulty trying to understand certain words that you're saying? You need to do research on your audience members and who will attend. So obviously, if you're giving a speech or presentation to a very general audience from all different age groups, of course you can't hit and make sure that everyone enjoys what you're saying, right? You can't please everyone, simply put. However, it is your responsibility to collect data, as much data as possible about your audience, so you can best cater to the majority of the audience. Because the reality is that not everyone's going to like your speech, but your job is to focus on the majority. And once you focus on the majority of your audience member, you can then branch out to the minority groups, right? So, for example, if your audience consists of primarily 30 to 40-year-olds in the engineering field, and then obviously the other 20% are maybe up and coming engineers, maybe who are younger, and you might even have maybe a couple children there, maybe maybe 12 to 14 years old. So obviously you would then focus on the topic of engineering. You would talk about maybe the struggles of being an engineer, some common difficulties, and so that involves the entire audience group. Aside from maybe specifically targeting the younger and youthful age group, your goal, you accomplish your goal, which is pleasing the majority of the audience, because again, you can't please everyone. Okay, now moving forward, the next tip, which is share personal examples, or simply put, tell your story. Use personal examples, because there are a couple of reasons for this. First, it builds an emotional connection with your audience. Or if you're familiar with the artistic proofs, what this does is it creates and utilizes pathos, or pathos, as some would say. Now, think about your relationships, right? Think about who is actually willing to listen to you. The individuals that you're more likely to listen to are those that you have an emotional bond with. So that's very important. Now, how do you create emotional bonds with individuals? Share your story. Tell your story. We all love stories. We listen to stories every single day, right? Stories are in TV shows, newspaper articles, movies, podcasts, etc., right? Stories are everywhere. Stories are everywhere, right? We can't, and that's one of the biggest marketing tools, right? People tell stories, or companies tell stories to help you, as the consumer, connect with that particular topic, right? We buy with our emotions most of the time. Now, here's another reason why you should share personal examples, because personal examples are easier for you to remember. Because one of the most difficult things that a lot of individuals have when it comes to presenting a speech is that they are concerned about forgetting a line or forgetting a topic or something along those lines. And if you are super hardcore when it comes to preparation, of course, ideally you would memorize your entire speech word for word. However, not everyone has that time or that drive to memorize their speech word for word. Therefore, how do you maximize be your only a certain how do you maximize your time? Simply put, it is share personal examples because you already know these personal examples. So think about your life, right? Think about certain memories that you have. And once you know those memories, do those memories connect with your speech? Do they talk about a specific element of your speech? For example, if we're using the same example of being an engineer, do you have any specific stories or specific examples of you being an engineer? Maybe talk about the difficulties. You can talk about the goods, the bads, all that stuff. So use personal examples. Always tell your story, because we all love stories. Again, stories are everywhere. Movies, television, magazines, articles, and products we buy. That's just being a human being. We connect and want to be more invested in something if we care. Now, moving forward, number 3, here's a simple tip to make public speaking a lot easier. Don't rely too heavily on technology. Now, here's the thing about technology. Technology is unreliable and difficult to control. So here's an example that I have. So 2-3 years ago, I don't exactly know how long ago, but I was asked to give a presentation for the nonprofit that I created. So obviously before my actual presentation day, they asked me to send in my PowerPoint, right? Which I did. Send in the PowerPoint, and then I arrived to the actual venue. Now, a few minutes before I was asked to speak, for some reason, their computer wasn't able to project my PowerPoint presentation onto the wall, right? They weren't able to project my slides, simply put. So, most people in this situation would probably panic and they wouldn't know what to do, right? Because it's like, oh my God, I put too much emphasis and too much energy and so much energy, so much emphasis on my PowerPoint presentation. I need my presentation in order to present, because your presentation is kind of like your mental note cards, right? That's what a lot of people do, right? They rely so heavily on their PowerPoint to ensure that their speech or presentation runs smoothly. But that's problematic, because I think if you're doing any Zoom meetings or Zoom sessions now during the pandemic, you're going to realize that technology is extremely unreliable and there's so many variables involved that you can't control. So how do you counter this? Focus on what you can control. Now, going back to my presentation as for the nonprofit, once I found out that my presentation slides weren't working, I just walked in front of the room, or, well, to start, I told them it's fine, don't worry about it. I walked in front of the room and then I gave my presentation. And then most people would be thinking like, oh, wait, did you memorize it? No, I didn't memorize my speech word for word. Why? Because I'm busy. I have a lot of other things to do. So I didn't have the time to memorize my speech word for word. However, I did know my speech. I knew the personal stories I was going to tell. I knew how I was going to start my speech. I knew the organization of my speech. And by the end of it, I did a great job. A lot of people enjoyed it. I signed up a lot of individuals to be part of my nonprofit, and it was ultimately very, very successful. And the reason why it was only successful is I cater it to not relying on technology, because in that particular instance, it did not work out. If I invested so much in my PowerPoint presentation, I would have failed. That meant that I didn't have time to prepare for my actual speech, my actual delivery, right? So don't rely too heavily on technology. It's important. It's a very valuable tool, but that's what technology is. Technology is a tool, right? However, with any tool, it can be unreliable. It can break. It can malfunction. There are a lot of variables in technology. Use it, but don't rely on it. Now, moving forward, number 4, prepare for possible problems. And this is kind of a nice segue from my previous example, nonprofit. You want to predict or predict possible problems that can occur. Here are some examples. Will your speech go under or over time? Will you have a memory blank? Will you have tech issues? These are the most common problems that a lot of presentations have, right? Their speech goes under or over time. You're worried about the time limit. Second thing is you're worried about actually blanking out and not remembering your speech. And third is obviously tech issues. So it is your responsibility to prepare for these possible problems. So let's figure out how to prepare for under or over time. It's simple. Read your speech out loud and time it multiple times and find the average time of your presentation. So for example, let's say you have a presentation in 3 days. Now, obviously you'll have your speech kind of written, right? Depending on your style, you can have your speech entirely written, or you can have just the main ideas of your speech. Regardless, it depends on you. So ideally, you would at least practice your speech. And my rule of thumb is at least practice your speech 3 times. Why 3 times? Because you want to find the average time of how your presentation is going. Because the first time you do or practice your speech, it can be rushed. Second time, it could be too slow. Third time could be the sweet spot. But regardless, you kind of want to find the average. So practice your speech before the actual presentation and time it at least 3 times. The more, the better. But it depends on your schedule. It depends on how much you want to prepare. There's a lot of variables involved. But prepare for possible problems, especially with time. And here's a rule of thumb. It is always better to go under time than it is over time. Because think about it. Most people don't like it when others waste their time or they go over what is expected of their actual meeting time. Why? Because they probably plan accordingly. They might have lunch next, or they have to meet up with a friend. But because your presentation is running long, you're postponing that, or you're kind of messing up their schedule. So avoid going over time at all costs. It is always better to go under time. Now, memory blank. This is when you kind of just forget what you're going to say. And this is one of the common problems that a lot of people have, or that they're afraid of when they're giving presentations, because they ultimately panic and then they're scared about how everyone's going to feel and think when they're blanking out. Simple. Remember one of the previous steps where I said share your personal examples? That's the tip that I would suggest for you when you blank out. Is you forget that you have a lot of content or you have a lot of information in your brain if you prepared well enough. But regardless, I'm sure if you prepared for a presentation, you have a lot of material in your brain. However, you might not remember everything at the time you need it to. But one of the easiest things to remember are examples or stories. And stories are always valuable to tell. So when you have a memory blank, you can always use a personal example to kind of eat up that empty time, that emptiness in the air when you forget something. And when you forget, tell your story, but also slow down when you're telling the story. Now, why do I tell you to slow down? It's simple. When you slow down, it allows your brain to process the information easier, but also it helps you think of the next sentence or think of a way to transition back to your speech. And this is a tip that I don't see a lot of people talking about. That might be because they're not as experienced. I don't know. But whenever I have a memory blank, especially when it comes to presentations, I speak slower, share an example, and then while I'm delivering that example, I allow my brain to process and try to figure out where I left off in my speech. It's that little trick that helps you kind of jump back in. So use it. And the next one is tech issues, as I previously mentioned in, again, the previous main point, or in the previous, tip. So use that. Prepare for possible problems. This will save you a lot of heartbreak and a lot of embarrassment if you do this, right? You want to be prepared. Preparation is key, and that's where you build confidence from. Okay, last tip is that nervousness is normal. So one thing I get from a lot of beginner public speakers is that, oh, how do I get rid of my nervousness? How do I become more confident? One thing that you need to realize is that nervousness is normal, and it will probably stay with you for a long time. So, for example, myself, I still get nervous, and I've been doing speeches for 14, 15 years. I don't know exactly. I started when I was a freshman in high school, my first year in high school, and now that was when I was 14, and now I'm 29. So 14 years, yeah, going on 15. I still get nervous. Now, one thing you need to focus on is that why you're actually nervous. I think that's most important. You're nervous because you care about doing a good job. Think about the moments that you're actually nervous. You're nervous because you don't want to mess up or you don't want to fail, right? Nervousness comes with that particular feeling, is that you are emotionally attached to what you're doing. Therefore, for the rest of your life, I mean, if you're constantly pushing yourself to do new adventurous things to kind of improve yourself, you're going to get nervous because there's something at stake, right? There's your pride at stake, there's your ego maybe, there's your confidence, there's a lot of those elements involved. Therefore, your nervousness is very normal. And the great public speakers know this. The great public speakers don't try to ignore or avoid the nerves. They embrace it, and they understand it, and they understand that it is normal. They learn how to calm their nerves. Because for me personally, and the people I've worked with, I always tell them, your goal shouldn't be to get rid of nervousness, especially when it comes to presentations. It should be learning how to control it. And once you learn how to control your nerves, you'll do a great job in your presentation, and it will also apply to a lot of other things and other facets of your life. You won't be nervous to ask that person out on a date. You won't be nervous to take a new risk, right? Things along those lines, because nervousness is normal. And at the end of the day, when it comes to nerves, there will be audience members who like and dislike your speech regardless. There is no perfect speech. You can try to find one. There will not be one. Maybe for you, there is one. However, objectively speaking, what you like, someone else might not like. Therefore, when you go and give your presentations, your goal should always to be try to inform and do an efficient job with your presentation. Because one thing I notice about a lot of public speakers, a lot of beginners, is that their goals are way too high. They want to make the audience laugh. You want to make the audience cry. You want to make audience do all this and that and this and that. Those are great goals, but realistically, you're not going to be able to do that overnight. And that's one thing that a lot of beginners kind of set themselves up for that failure. That hence the reason why they'll get disappointed after a presentation. Their audience didn't react the certain way that they would like, right? Because they kind of overhype themselves up too much. But going back to nervousness, it's normal. Embrace it. Learn to calm yourself down. You can still be nervous during presentations because you care about doing a good job. However, your nerves shouldn't overtake your ability to do an efficient job during your speech. That's the most important part, especially for beginners. Once you learn the foundational knowledge, once you overcome your fear, once you learn the delivery techniques, more effective ways to deliver your speech, you won't be as nervous. However, that doesn't completely remove the nerves from your future presentations. Because again, at the end of the day, if it's something you care about, more often than not, you will be nervous about doing that particular thing. Now, those are a few tips to make public speaking easier for you all. They're realistic and they're applicable. So I would highly suggest you all to take these tips, apply it. Ideally, it's difficult to apply all 5 of them at the same time, but start small, right? Take one tip, apply it. Once you achieve your goal with that one particular tip, then move on, right? It takes steps. So hopefully these tips were helpful. If you apply them, I'm pretty confident that you'll do a great job. So if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. All right, take care, y'all.